listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
Hello there, IELTS students. In this tutorial, we are going to tell you how you can apply for the IELTS exam. And with me in this tutorial is Daphne. How are you doing, Daphne?
Hi, Ben. I'm very well. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, before this, we were just talking about how hot it is in Europe at the moment. We're both absolutely frying, literally.
That's so true. Well, I'm not sure what temperature you're meant to have today, Ben, but I'm in France at the moment, and the temperature today is going to be 40 degrees. So this is officially a heat wave because it really doesn't cool down much at night either. So
Wow.
I mean, I'm not complaining. I love the sun, but this is almost too hot to go outside right now.
Yeah, I think if global warming continues, people from England will stop going on holiday to Spain or Italy, France, wherever, and the south of England will become like northern France, I guess. That'll be quite interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's already happening. They're already planting lots of vineyards in the south of England because wine, traditionally, we think of it as growing in France, but there's a big business now in the south of England. So that's all due to climate change. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting. It's changed a lot, hasn't it? It's so quick. But before we jump into how to apply for IELTS, I just want to ask you, Daphne, can you tell me how you got into teaching IELTS, please?
Okay. Thanks for asking, man. So I started IELTS when I've probably been teaching for a couple of years, and I was teaching at a language school in England, south of England. And there were these mysterious IELTS classes going on every afternoon, but only a couple of teachers were allowed to teach the IELTS classes. But every single student wanted to do IELTS. And I didn't really realize why everyone wanted to do it. And this is something obviously we're going to be talking about today as well. But everybody wanted to do an IELTS class. And eventually, as I got to know the school better and as they trusted me better, I suppose, I was allowed my own IELTS class. And I was hooked. And from the moment I started teaching IELTS, I thought, this is really what I want to specialize in. It's an incredibly difficult exam, as you all know, but also it's a really high stakes exam. So the kind of benefit to teacher of helping people to achieve their dream and getting on the next step of their journey is just the best. So that's kind
Absolutely.
of, that's kind of how I fell into it, I suppose, and then specialized from there. Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, it's not the same route I took. I mean, I was in Spain and I was teaching English because I just finished my Erasmus. I just finished my the student exchange program, and I was just teaching general English. And then, like you, there was a lot of students talking about the IELTS exam. But I remember vividly, I was sitting down with one student, and we were planning to write an IELTS Task 2 essay, and we'd planned it out, and then we looked at it again, and we realized we were contradicting ourselves in both paragraphs. And I was like, and this was really embarrassing for me because I was supposed to be the expert, and I was really frustrated then, and the student was even more confused because they saw the teacher who was frustrated and who was obviously confused as well. So I just started asking more tutors in the academy where I was working. I got some amazing advice. So this is why, very briefly, I just decided to, not very briefly, but I just decided to record these interviews, and I started looking for more tutors, and that's how basically I got into this IELTS podcast, because I thought, okay, I'm going to record these, I'm going to publish them, and then basically I was just testing the advice that they gave me, and some of it didn't cut the grade. Some of it was really like theoretical. Some of it was just useless, like write a coherent essay, and I'm like, wow, yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, exactly. I've never heard that before. Write a coherent essay that's going to score you high. That's how you pass the IELTS exam. I was like, all right,
great.
Yeah, super. But it wasn't until I was writing out, I must have written hundreds of Task 2 essays, and then after writing out so many, I kind of stumbled across this pattern, which basically made it so much easier. If I followed this pattern, then if I followed this system, this sort of like sequence of events, it just made it so much clearer. I knew what to put in for every single sentence. So
I think that, yeah, I mean, I think that's just so true. I think that's just to pick up on that. Some people say, oh, well, IELTS writing is very formulaic. But I mean, formulaic, but make that into a positive. I mean, yes, the examiner has very high expectations of what he's looking for, but you can work within that formula, that coherence really is what Ben's saying, and you can still produce something pretty special, can't you?
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the first kind of like formula I kind of discovered, or the first system I was using, was quite basic, and that went into the first course. But then, after writing more essays and getting more feedback from students, it just slowly evolved, and that's what we've got now in the online course with the CTRT method and the C2 template, and yeah, this is what part of the online course that we now offer. And just moving on, before we talk about how to apply for IELTS, Daphne, I've got a big thank you to pass on to you from Aileen, who was struggling for 6 months in a local academy in England. Then lockdown came and she was still struggling on band 6, and then after 3 attempts she decided to stop working with her local academy, and she just took all her correction online, all her preparation online. And during the interview she was very grateful about your help, and I just wanted to pass that on. So big thank you from Aileen.
Oh, thank you so much. She was a star. I mean, everybody is. You all are. Everyone that gets on board with us and does the corrections and listens to the feedback we give them, and then improves and improves and improves. And she just went for it. She was so motivated. Every time she got her feedback, she went, okay, I'm going to learn from that and I'm going to move on. And you could really see the changes in her essays. And a lot of it's confidence too, isn't it, Ben? You know, if you've got someone on your side really kind of taking this whole journey with you, it makes a big difference, I hope.
Exactly. It's like an IELTS examiner who's basically looking over your shoulder while you're writing. When you're getting the feedback, this is how I kind of like explain it. It literally is like an expert examiner looking over your shoulder and saying, okay, you did this right, you did this wrong, you need to improve this, you need to follow this formula. And this is how we get results back. And just one last thing, she said that the feedback was coming back really fast, which I think helped her to sort of like keep moving and keep the momentum going. And just one last thing, Aileen, she was an action taker, you know.
Yes, absolutely. I can see that.
Yeah, she was just moving fast. She was taking on board the feedback. Fair enough, England was in lockdown at the time, so obviously she had more free time on her hand. But it's this sort of like action taking and momentum that I find separates the successful students from the non-successful ones.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. You've got to keep moving. And I know it's not always easy. You've got jobs and everything else, and pressures. But the whole thing about IELTS is little steps at a time. But it's suddenly you take a massive leap forward, and then you're there.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go into it. So how to apply for IELTS. So before we start, we're just going to look at the different options. You've got IELTS Academic for university study. You've got general training for migration and work purposes. Then you've got IELTS UK VI, which is for, and that can be academic or general, and that's used for UK visas and immigration. And then there is IELTS Life Skills, which is usually for the family migrants of the students who are going to the UK. And we've also got, since 2016, computer-based IELTS, which I think was a massive help for students. I'm a big fan of the computer-based one.
I think it's made a huge difference, absolutely. And now obviously we encourage our students to write, you have to type your answer, because I think people are generally more used to working on computers now than they used to be. And I think the computer test is really much more user-friendly. You get your results back quicker. I think it's 5 to 7 days for the results compared to 13. in the case of a paper exam. And many candidates, you prefer the keyboard. You're more used to reading on screen now in newspapers and journals. And reading, actually focusing on reading a piece of paper can be quite difficult, can't it?
Yep, totally. And another benefit of the computer-based one is, I think, is absolutely, it's so helpful for essay writing, because when you're planning an essay, sometimes you want to, remove a phrase. You might have a thought that you might want to put in, and it just, when you're doing it in computer, you copy paste in. It just makes it so much more straightforward. Like copy pasting on the paper-based is obviously impossible, and if you even do try and attempt it, your work is going to look messy. So if you're doing it paper-based, you really got to get it right first time, which just adds to the pressure. But one thing I do want to mention is that, as Vinod mentions, he's the student who about a month ago he jumped to 7.5.
Oh, he did really well.
Yeah, he really took advantage of the lockdown. But he mentioned something, and a lot of students have said the same since, who I've been talking to anyway. They said the listening on computer-based is slightly more challenging, because you've got to learn a new exam skill, which is typing and listening simultaneously.
Oh.
Yeah, and previous students who've just done the paper-based didn't seem to struggle as much with listening and writing for some reason, but the typing and listening simultaneously seems to be a challenge. So
I'm glad you've highlighted that, Ben, because that's something that's quite easy to practice. Now you're really multitasking, aren't you? But what you could do to practice is listen to a news report or something, but type out some key phrases, or type out a quick summary, or something at the same time, just so that the exam isn't the first time that you've had to do that.
Exactly, yeah. I guess this is probably one of the challenges that the students are encountering, is like, oh, I've never typed and listened at the same time. Whereas, as you said, if they just get familiar with this skill and work on this skill, then they're going to avoid these surprises come exam day.
Absolutely. Good. And now it's not a surprise because Ben's told us all about it.
Exactly, yeah. All right, so moving on, we've got all these, both computer-based and the paper-based are taken at British Council or IDP centres, and the speaking is still face-to-face. There's also IELTS indicator as well. Oh, just one last thing. Not all test centres are offering the computer-based one yet, so you're best going to the official website, IELTS.org, and finding out if it's available in your test centre. There is the IELTS indicator, which I think could be possibly the future of IELTS tests. I would love to see it being the future, actually.
So would I. I mean, this was introduced during COVID, and it was a very good and relatively quick response, I think, from British Council, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Acknowledging how many people were frustrated because they were ready for their exam. The exam centres closed all around the world. And also knowing that the implications for this exam are really key. You need the results to move on. So the indicator test was introduced. I assume, Ben, it's still operating because countries are still locked down and situations still fragile in so many places. But it's an online test you can do at home. And it's only for academic IELTS. I think that's important to point out. But it gives you the chance to do your exam when you're at home, you're safe, you've got your computer. The results are released in 7 days, and they can be shared with your, for example, if you want to go to university, can be shared direct with the university. The speaking is done face-to-face, but via Zoom. So via video conferencing, obviously not exactly with the examiner, but that's the day before or the day after. But that's still person to person, which is really important.
Yep, and we've done a full podcast about this, and I've done interviews with students who have taken the test. So if you just go online and put IELTS podcast, IELTS indicator, you'll find there's a few posts with a few tutorials we've done there. One is with Maria, and she explained it, and just a few points I want to mention. Of course, you need to be absolutely certain that you've got a solid, reliable internet connection while you're doing your test. So if you're from an area where it's patchy, then maybe you want to get into a place where it's going to be quiet. Obviously, it's going to be solid connection, because you really just don't want to be getting distracted. This is your day, and you don't want to be distracted by your family or by other people in the same room, or a shady, patchy internet connection. So you really want to just plan it all out beforehand, and maybe even do a test run. And likewise, and like we said before about the computer-based listening, get familiar with the format, and you can even do I think a simulation exam at IELTSindicator.com as well. So I'd strongly recommend that. All right, so we've got exam frequency. So the tests are done up to 48 times a year, and not every test centre is going to offer all the available dates. It largely depends on how much demand there is for the test, but I think the best thing to do is just check with your nearest centre. And the IELTS indicator is offered once a week. All right.
Yep.
And yeah, as we said, we think it's still currently available. It's a shame that it just seems it's got a temporary solution, but I imagine that maybe in the future, once all the creases have been ironed out, that maybe they'll bring it back in some way or form. Maybe if there's a second wave, actually, wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, I think the fact that it's there now, let's keep it there, the indicator.
Absolutely.
Because, as you said, Ben, you need to check with your test centre, obviously, and the website is pretty efficient and actually, I think, quite easy to navigate. But some of our students, especially some of the students in India, have said before they have to travel for a day to get to their nearest test centre. Can you imagine the stress that would cause you, having to travel, the expense of staying in a hotel to get to your test centre, compared to the ease of being able to do it at home?
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And plus, you've got all the commotion. You're losing time while you're traveling. You're going to be in an unfamiliar environment.
Yeah.
And even though there's like 1,600 test centers globally, and in theory, it sounds like it should be easy to find one that's near to you. Like you've just said, I remember I was teaching a Kazakhstani student online, and she said that she had to make a specific trip from her town into Astana, which is now called Nur Sultan, but she had to take a whole trip, a whole day's worth, get there the day before, check into the hotel, and then in the morning do the test. And some people don't even have, can't even afford the hotel, so they'll travel there in the morning, and it just seems like a nightmare. So this is another reason why we're big fans of the indicator test. What documents would you need when you are going to these physical academies, these test centers?
Yeah, so you need, this is super important, because if you don't have the right stuff, you cannot do the exam. You need your proof of identity for registration and again on the test day. And you need to take the same document with you. I know it sounds stupid, but the number of students I've had who've registered with one passport and then turned up with a different document. You need to have exactly the same document that you registered with to be checked on that test day. So you can choose your passport or national identity card, doesn't matter, but obviously be consistent. Outside your country, so for example, our Brazilian student taking her IELTS in the UK, she needs to have, you need to have your passport. So there, a national identity card won't be enough. So that's what you would need with you.
Absolutely, yeah. And then with the dates, you best check in online with your local test centre, and and as we said before, they might not all be available, but I think the best way is just to book it way in advance. And also, this will obviously help you with your preparation time, and obviously the longer you have to prepare for it, the more chance you have of getting the grade you want, assuming you take it, you're making use of this time that you've got. So you probably
I was going to say that's a good point, because you don't want to be under pressure booking the exam just before you need to finish your application, or that the your application time gap is finished, or when you're about to apply to university, you need to have your results in advance. You need to be confident that you've got what you need.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And also, yeah, you're usually going to wait a maximum of 13 days until you get your results back. I have heard hiccups. I have heard of hiccups in the past of students waiting a longer time, but it's very, very rare. I think in all my time of being involved with IELTS, I've only heard about this once. So basically what I'm saying is that it's like a well-oiled machine. It's in and out. Absolutely. And it's constant, and it's quite solid, and it's quite reliable. Yeah. Just one other thing about getting the test dates. If you are applying for doing the university route, then it's a good idea to get your IELTS academic test get it done before you start your academic year, which is probably going to be September or October. And there's just one other thing I want to mention here, that due to COVID, in some case, it's all been turned upside down. So in some cases, like Vinod mentioned a few weeks ago with his immigration, he's an Indian student who's living in Canada. This is really interesting, I thought. But because of COVID and the borders being locked down and no new immigrants coming in, what the authorities are doing is they've extended the deadlines, and they've made it easier for the applicants or the migrants that are already in Canada. They've made it easier for them to progress through the system, for example, extending deadlines and perhaps lowering the criteria slightly. And because basically the authorities, they've got quotas to meet for the amount of migrants they let in, and with the borders closed, those the new migrants aren't coming in, so they've got to let the ones who are already there into the country and get them through the PR system. So what I'm saying,
that sounds like quite a sneaky opportunity, Ben.
Exactly. I was praising Vinod because he'd been checking the website. He'd been like really on the ball, and he was like, okay, this is like my one chance where the application process is going to be slightly easier than it is usually, and he took it. He was checking for immigration for test centers outside of Toronto. He went over to a far away one, and he got his visa. He just took that opportunity. I was so proud of him.
Fantastic. That's a real window of opportunity, and I know it's the same here in the UK. Students applying to universities, because some of my students want to go to universities in the UK, and the universities are very keen to recruit overseas students because no one knows what's going to happen with university numbers in September. As Ben said, travels are uncertain, it's difficult. So if your uni previously wanted a band 7, the chances are if you come up with a band 6.5, you'll be absolutely fine. So there is a little window of opportunity, we say there.
Exactly. And I would strongly recommend the students to take this opportunity, because maybe next year everything's solved. We've got the vaccine out, and the doors are wide open, and everybody's piling in to study at Oxford, Nottingham, or wherever, or Sydney, and the restriction is going to go back up. It's going to be harder for students going for. It's going to be harder for those going for PR.
More competitive, won't it?
Exactly. So. Really, don't let COVID sort of like bring you down. This for a lot of students, for a lot of people, there is an opportunity there. So there is a silver lining if you are stuck in lockdown. And I think the best thing to do is, as Daphne was saying, is like be on the ball and just check with your university, check with the immigration authority. Make sure your immigration agent is on the ball. That he or she is constantly monitoring the situation.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
All right then. So what is the process? Well, let's go through the process now. So the first step is to register online, or you can download the application, either with the British Council IDP, according to your chosen test centre. Get that application, and obviously fill that out, and then include your ID. Obviously, you don't want to put your expired ID, so just check the dates and upload it if it's required. And then you can print it out, and you can go to the British Council or the IDP office. You pay online, and Yeah, and then you'll get the confirmation regarding your test center. But apparently, what I've been hearing is that it's quite irregular. Like I was talking to, I think it was Gabriella. She was in London, and she said that she was getting emails saying, "Okay, the test is on this date," and then a few days later, "Nope, test has been cancelled due to lockdown restrictions." Test back on a few days later. So, especially at the moment, you've got to be really on the ball.
And also, I mean, just if I can add to that, I would also keep a record or somewhere in a little file every correspondence you have with IELTS, all your receipts, all your proof of payments or whatever it is. Keep all that together, because I've had a lovely student, Veronica, and she wanted to get back in touch with IELTS because she was very confused about something, and it is really hard to get hold of them sometimes, but they're very busy at the moment anyway. They want the more information you can provide them with. Yes, I paid on this date, and here's the reference number and everything. The easier it is for them to then sort out your difficulty.
Absolutely. I do the same. I'll just group all, I don't know, accounting documents, just label it all in one folder. And when you're corresponding, just one other thing, make sure you've got those numbers. And this is what we're going to get to later, is that when you're preparing for the test, especially if you're doing our online course, we're going to help you improve your writing. And this is a vital skill that's going to make your communication clearer. It's going to improve your clarity of thought. And in correspondence like this with, for example, IELTS organization or the immigration office or the university, if you can communicate your situation clearly, then it just makes everything so much smoother, and you just write out the whole situation. And ideally, there's no grammar errors in there. You're just making their life easier, which obviously makes your life easier too.
You think of it like a task one practice. I mean, these are letters which we genuinely write. I always say to students, when you're preparing for task one, these are real situations. We, as English native speakers, we write these letters, and this is the language we actually use. It's not, the context is real, I think is what I'm trying to say. So you think of trying to communicate with IELTS, you genuinely are explaining a problem, you genuinely want a solution. So yeah, look at it like not only helping you get your exam on the right day, but also as writing practice.
Exactly, this is so true. I mean, as you may know, I'm from Yorkshire, I'm from England. I sometimes say Manchester because people don't understand where Yorkshire is, but I'm from Yorkshire. But I'm now living in Hungary, in Budapest, and I'm applying for residency here, and I have to write a covering letter about why I want to be a resident in Hungary. And I'm literally writing out a general task one letter. And I'm putting like, "Dear Sarah, madam," and I'm just following everything that's in the course, and I'm like, "I'm writing to you in regards to my application to become a Hungarian resident."
There you go.
And I'm putting like the most important aspects first. I'm putting stuff that they would probably want to see in that application. I'm putting it at the beginning. And it's all there in like 3 paragraphs. It literally is a general task one.
Yeah, those conventions in a formal letter are really, really important, and they're useful. They're real. Here we go. Absolutely.
Okay, so we've just got a few points, some pieces of advice for you on exam day. Well, just in general, but for the exam day, we recommend that you're there, 30, 45 minutes before the test starts. In one episode, actually, one student, she said that she was doing diaphragmatic breathing exercises because she was so nervous.
That's powerful.
Yeah, and she couldn't have done that if she gets there 5 minutes before the exam, obviously. So she'd obviously got there a good 30, 45 minutes beforehand, and she could just sit down, basically, as we say in England, getting all your ducks in order, which just basically means getting everything sorted, and just so you can be relaxed and you can focus on the exam rather than scrambling around in your bag looking for your passport and whatnot.
Oh yeah, exactly. Get your head in the right place and kind of tune into the seriousness of the exam room. If you can, when you're on the way there, on the bus or whatever, just listen to something English so you've tuned into the English. That was a top tip from another student, wasn't it, Ben?
Mm-hmm.
Tuning into the language so that the listening's easier. Yeah. All those things are really important, because also you're going to have security checks. So you don't want to be panicking about, the stress of the security check. You want to go through this really calm, and then you can get into your kind of in the right mood before you start.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And as we said before, make sure you're taking the same ID that you used when you registered online. So if you used your passport when you were registering online, take your passport with you. Don't take your driver's license, for example. It's got to be the same. And also with the speaking, as we just mentioned before, I strongly recommend, and I'm saying this from personal experience, that when I start speaking Spanish, and I haven't spoken it for a while, I am rusty, and it's embarrassing, and it's frustrating, because I know I'm so much better than when I'm talking after not talking for a while. So, but after a few days there, and after a few conversations, it's all flowing, my vocabulary is coming back, and I'm warmed up. And this is sort of like the state. This is your true level, and this is what you want to show to the examiner. You don't want to show a cold warming up level of English. You want to show your true ability, which is probably going to be after speaking for a good hour or two with people, and you're really warmed up, and you're in that sort of like social mode. That's the level you want to be in.
Yeah, you want to be relaxed. You do not want to be panicking. Yes, and then you'll perform better. You're more in your groove, aren't you, as you say?
Absolutely, yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. Do you get this with? Do you speak French? I can't remember.
Yeah, I do. I do speak French, and I have exactly the same thing. It takes me a couple of days to really get the speed I want. And I was chatting to somebody, a French lady, this morning, and I knew exactly what I wanted to say, but I couldn't find quite the right words. So, as you all know, paraphrase quickly. How can I get around this? So I got around it another way, which was absolutely fine. But I did say to her afterwards, "What would you say?" Because obviously this wasn't an exam context. But then she taught me the right word, and I thought, okay, that's fine. So next time I'll use that.
Awesome.
So for me, this is how I have to learn is just someone giving me another word, and I'll think, okay, I'll try that next time, see how it goes.
Yeah, I've got one really cultured friend. Doesn't say much. But doesn't say much about me, but I've got one really cultured friend in Valencia. I really like high level, and he's got an amazing vocabulary, so I bounce off all my language questions with him.
It helps, doesn't it? It's great.
Totally. Okay, so moving on to the cost.
Yes.
Right, so as we know, we've IELTS Academic in general cost exactly the same. UKVI does cost a little bit more, but Life Skills is somewhat cheaper. And it's quite tricky to give universal figures, because there's small differences between country to country, and there's also the currencies which are moving up and down as well. Yeah. But roughly, what would you say it would be?
I mean, the IELTS normally is around $200. I mean, I'd say almost a bit more than that, actually, but around $200, $240 for the regular IELTS. In rupees, I don't even dare do that in translation in the currency, but roughly that in dollars. What is important and maybe interesting, if you're interested in the IELTS indicator, that is significantly cheaper. So that's $149. So quite a big difference there, actually.
Yeah, but we just need to add one little point, that even though it's cheaper, it doesn't have the same value as an official one, because some places are still not accepting the IELTS indicator test. So even though it's cheaper, you really should check with your immigration authority or with your university if they would accept the IELTS indicator.
Yeah, no, that's a really important point to make. And of course, for immigration, it doesn't work. It is more academic. So limited usage, but I suppose that's why it's cheaper, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And there's just one thing I want to mention before we finish, is that this isn't a cheap exam. As we said, $240. And I know so many students that will take test after test after test, and they'll spend even thousands on the preparation, and maybe with a physical language course or whatever. But if you are investing this much on the test, $240 for example, then you really don't want to risk losing that money. So what I'm saying is that because the test is so expensive, it really does justify investing in yourself to make sure it's the first and last test that you take.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And the stories we have of people who've taken their exam again and again and again, the expense is terrifying, Ben, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the more we can help you to take this test finally and get it done finally, then we will.
Yeah, I had one student in one of the early series, and she'd taken over 20 tests. Poor lass.
Oh my goodness me!
Yeah.
How heartbreaking! What an effort to keep motivated.
Yeah. But I think a lot of students get into this rut and get frustrated, and it's like, okay, I'm going to take a test again. I didn't get it. I'll put it in straight again and again and again and again. And just hoping, ideally, that maybe it's going to change this time. Maybe I'll get lucky. Maybe I'll get an easier question. But it speaks a lot about how accurate the IELTS test is. Unless you're really investing in yourself and unless you're really getting that feedback, then you're not going to improve. And if you're not improving, then obviously you're going to be stuck at that same grade. So you could take 20 tests, 30 tests,
and get the same results. That would be awful.
Exactly. So if you are in this kind of situation, we strongly recommend that you get some feedback because you're going to be continuously getting that same grade. It's not going to change if you just take a test a week later, 2 weeks later. You're going to be stuck there unless you really invest in yourself. And basically, I mean, if you're taking our online course, for example, it pays for itself. You know, if you pass first time, which is what we offer, jump to band 7, or it's free, and you do pass, then you've got no more tests, so it's paid for itself.
Exactly, that's so true. I like the positive way of thinking about that, and it's true. It works. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And if you want to, just before we finish, if you go to IELTS Podcast Success Stories, and listen to those previous episodes we've done with students, you can learn from their mistakes. I think maybe like 1 in 3 of the success story interviews we do, no, probably less, maybe 1 in 4 is from a student who's done it first time. All the others have taken it 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 times, and it's heartbreaking, as you said.
Yeah, no, I love listening to those stories because they're really so helpful, and everyone, when they share their tips on what they did and what worked, is great. I mean, the more kind of student to student tips you can get, I think that's so valuable, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I've learnt a few tips from them as well.
Yes, me too.
Okay, so that's everything from Daphne and myself today. Remember, if you are in lockdown, to keep moving, and if you are struggling with IELTS, please get in contact. We can help you. We've got special offers for students who reach out to us and ask for help with their writing. We've got the online course. We've got fast corrections. So you send us your work, and usually within 24 hours, we'll get you your essay back so you can keep moving. And we've got the IELTS apps as well. So just search in the App Store or Google Play Store for Ben Worthington IELTS, and you'll see our tutorials there, along with the transcripts and along with some special offers. And just remember, you're not alone in this. We are here to help you.
Absolutely. I'm very, very happy to help. And thanks so much for listening, everybody.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.